The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of committee substitute for House Bill 3042 relating to forbidding excessive government limitations on exercise of religion.
Message will be received, Senior Senator, from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our question is consent that the committee reference be dispensed with and the bill be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the bill first time.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3042 relating to forbidding excessive government limitations on exercise of religion. First reading of the bill.
Bill will be advanced. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the constitutional rule requiring bills to be read on 3 different days to be suspended and the bill be read a second and third time and placed upon its passage.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the constitutional rule requiring bills to be read on 3 different days be suspended and the bills be read a second and third time and placed upon its passage. All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question, 30 yeas, 3 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than 4/5 of the members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the constitutional rules suspended. The clerk will read the bill a second time.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3042 relating to forbidding excessive government limitations on exercise of religion. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be advanced to third reading. The clerk will read the bill a third time.
Committee substitute for House Bill 3042 relating to forbidding excessive government limitations on exercise of religion. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. The purpose of this bill is to prohibit government actors from treating religious persons or institutions like churches and synagogues more restrictively than comparable secular institutions or persons. The bill also establishes a standard called the compelling state interest test for courts to use when evaluating whether the government has infringed on the freedom of religion. This judicial standard already applies to all federal laws and is in place in most states. A reviewing court's standard of review, or the compelling interest test, actually begins with the first step is, does the individual have a sincere religious belief that is being substantially burdened by government action? If the answer is no, then the case is closed and the individual loses. If the answer is yes, then the case moves forward. The second step is compelling interest. Does the government have a very good reason to interfere? If the answer is no, the case is closed, then the individual wins. If the answer is yes, then the case moves forward. The third step is there a reasonable alternative to serve the public interest, or as we would call it, the least restrictive means. If the answer is no, the case is closed and the individual loses. If the answer is yes, the case is closed and the individual wins. The bill also states that nothing in the new section may be construed to create a defense to protect actions to end the life of a born or unborn person. And finally, Mr. President, in substance and form, this bill actually mirrors the South Dakota Religious Freedom Law, which went into effect in 2021, and no successful challenges to it have been found. I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. President. I urge passage, and I please reserve the right to close.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the education chair...
Will the Senator from Mason yield? The Senator yields.
Absolutely.
So we're moving very fast here. As I understand the bill, one of the things it would do, and tell me if I'm correct, would be to, if there was another COVID outbreak, prevent the state from closing my church and preventing me from exercising my freedom of religion. Or as the bill puts it, the exercise of my freedom of religion. Is that correct?
Yes. If other secular institutions are left open, such as movie theaters, shopping malls, casinos, then churches cannot be closed.
Okay, so I'm assuming that's one of the purposes of the bill, right?
Yes, sir.
This bill applies to political subdivisions, does it not? Which would obviously be a county or a city or
Yes,
town.
it would apply to the entire state.
Okay, so the same standard of law would be imposed, for example, on the city where I live, Huntington, if it had, for example, which it does, a non-discrimination ordinance. That standard that you've talked about, this bill would apply to Huntington, in my view, are going to be challenged.
I do not.
So I'm going to name them because they're in Many districts, Athens, Beckley, Bolivar, Charlestown, Charleston, Harpers Ferry, Huntington, Kaiser, Lewisburg, Martinsburg, Monongah, Morgantown, Shepherdstown, South Charleston, Sutton, Thurmond, and Wheeling. So you don't have any pause that we are going to set up challenges against the non-discrimination ordinances of any of those communities?
No, sir, this is not a tool to use for discrimination. So I don't have any concerns about that whatsoever. It's actually, if you would consider it, more of a shield to protect all people. So not just the people in those ordinances or in those municipalities that you're talking about. This isn't to be used to attack a group of people. And it doesn't mention any classes of persons or anything like that. And it's been in law in many states for 30 years or more. And there have never been any cases of discrimination.
Well, let me ask you this. I understand what you're saying. Would you agree with me that a lot of people, including some people in this chamber, believe that they have a religious right against vaccination of their children, that infringes upon their religious beliefs? There are people that believe that. Is that right?
I believe there are people to believe that, but I wouldn't want to speculate who in this chamber does.
Well, I wasn't going to ask you to name names, but can you agree with me that people in the world, in our communities, believe that they have a right under their basic exercise, their freedom of religion, not to vaccinate their children? Are there people in our communities that see the world that way?
Well, the law on vaccinations is already settled. There are religions that believe that, but I think you're mostly probably talking more about a philosophical belief.
Okay. Can I just get a yes or no? Are there people in our state that believe that a vaccination is a burden on their freedom of religion? Do you think there are or not? Or do you not know?
I could speculate that there may be, but I couldn't answer indefinitely. I only know how I feel or think.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you there are people that believe that. So you're telling us in this chamber, because we're getting ready to vote on this bill, you're telling us that anybody that would challenge the vaccination law based on this bill is going to lose in court, right? They're not going to prevail in court under their freedom of religion under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Is that what you're telling us? Because I'm
No.
getting ready to vote on this.
No, sir, I'm not telling you that.
So
I'm saying that it would go through that compelling interest test, which were those 3 steps that I mentioned when I read it.
Well, let me tell you about the compelling state interest test, or I like to call the strict scrutiny test. When you have a fundamental constitutional right to freedom of religion, which each of us has, First Amendment, if you're going to infringe on that, there must be a compelling state interest. That's what compelling state interest means. So, Senator, you're going to tell me whether those people they're all going to lose in court on the vaccination issue, the fact that they believe that their freedom of religion gives them a right to decline vaccinations for their children to be educated in the public school system. They're all going to lose in court, right? Because it doesn't apply, right?
You're asking me to speculate what's going to happen in court. And I believe it was Workman versus Mingo County court decision would require that all children that go to a public school they've done the vaccinations and have to have their immunizations.
Would you agree with me that that case was decided before this bill became law, if it does?
Well, absolutely.
Okay.
That's before today.
Well, so you can't really rely on the Workman case, can you? Because this wouldn't have been considered, right? Okay. Let me ask you this. Why? Let's go to page 2, line 19. What in the world does taking the life of somebody, ending the life of a human being, is that like an eye for an eye? If I believe in the Old Testament and I want to kill somebody, an eye for an eye, and is that what this is about? This protection decisions? If I make a decision to end the life of my enemy, and I feel justified in my religious beliefs grounded in the Old Testament, an eye for an eye. Is that why that's in there on line 19 to prevent me from doing that?
Sir, the language in this is to say that you cannot use this statute to justify basically having an abortion.
Well, it says in the life of any human being, born or unborn. So I'm talking about the born people first, and then
Okay.
I'll talk about the unborn people. So why is that in there? What in the world is that intended to
For the
prevent?
exact reason that it states that you cannot use a religious belief to justify murder.
Okay, I'll accept that. Now, let's talk about the unborn. Why is that in there?
For the same reason, you can't use a religious belief to justify murder of an unborn child.
Well, what does that have to do with? I don't follow you. I don't follow you on why that's in this bill.
Further protection.
What's that? Who's protected?
Further protection of the unborn.
Yeah, we
So-
already have that protected. It passed. I voted for it. Why is it in this bill? I don't understand the context that it's in this bill. Why is it here? It's got to be here for a reason. What?
Well, it's in the bill so that what is in this bill cannot be used as a defense for the action of abortion.
Well,
That's
what
why.
religion would allow that? What religion? Who would do that?
I don't know. Hopefully no one, but
Oh, I
just-
think the Jews would. I'll just speak to the bill. May I speak to the bill?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for yielding to questions. You know, the reason that's in the bill, Mr. President, is because in the Torah, been around a long time, the Torah, the book of Exodus, people that have the Jewish faith believe that life begins when the first breath is taken. Now, that's not my personal belief, but that's been a part of the Jewish faith for a long time. So I submit to you the reason that's in this bill is to discriminate against one group of people that they have the same right to exercise their freedom of religion. Page 1, we protect the people that see the world the way we do, if we're Christians. And page 2, we deny that same freedom to the Jewish faith. And I'll tell you right now, that's not going to withstand strict scrutiny. That is not going to hold up. That will declare this bill unconstitutional. A magistrate court would figure that one out. So that's what happens when we get in a hurry, respectfully. I don't know why the House would put that in there, but you can't say you're protecting religious freedom and then discriminate against one religion in the same, bill. Now, some of the folks that I've talked to believe that around here, not necessarily in this chamber, but in this building, believe that you should be able to discriminate against people based on a gay couple being married. Well, that's not the law. The law of our country is what it is. And people are allowed to get married. And I suspect this will be leading to situations where discrimination occurs against folks that are gay or lesbian, and they are married, and they will not be rented to because somebody wants to exercise their fundamental right to religion. And they're probably going to do it. You know why they're going to do it? Because they think Christ was murdered by the Jews. But that's not true. Christ wasn't murdered by the Jews. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, is who sentenced Christ to death and presided over his trial in the province of Judea. And he served the emperor Tiberius of Rome. That was government action. Nevertheless, if somebody wants to discriminate based on religion, here we go. And it's going to happen. And I guarantee, no disrespect to the chair of education, the senator from Putnam, but you will have litigation as soon as this bill goes that will challenge and I believe successfully negate Every one of those non-discriminatory ordinances. That's my prediction. So I urge a no vote on this. I don't want my priest to be compelled to perform a gay marriage, because in my religion, the church doesn't believe in that. I don't want my religion to be impaired. But I'm going to respect the religions of other people, and I'm going to respect other people that aren't exactly like I am. So I urge a no vote.
Further discussion. Senator from Marion?
I think he was anticipating that, Mr. President.
You had the mic in your
Appreciate that. Would the education chair yield to a couple questions, please?
Will the senator yield? Senator yields.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. You know, this is moving pretty quickly, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare some questions, but some of the concerns I have, Senator, have you talked to the business community about this? I'm real concerned about, what their thoughts may be on this.
Are you asking if you think it would have a negative impact
Yes.
on businesses or
Yes.
economic development? I haven't spoken with people on my own. I do have some reports based on how it has affected, or should I say not affected, other states that have this law. So if you give me a second, I will pull it out here and I will find that information. I don't want to say something and it be incorrect. But it is not, in any states that have passed this, Senator, it has not affected and has not had a negative effect on their economic development. As a matter of fact, most of the places still showed growth. I'm sorry, I have a ton of papers here, so let me see what I have. Here we go, but this is it. So if we look at, for instance, Texas, I think Texas is one. If we're looking at several others, hang on a second. I was not prepared for this question, but so let's look at Florida, Oklahoma, Arizona, Illinois, North Dakota. They've all shown tremendous growth when it comes to economic development, and nothing has impeded that growth based on this law.
Have you had any personal conversations with some of the new businesses that's coming to West Virginia? Because I know they have a lot of those Fortune 100 companies have anti-discrimination policies enacted in their company. Have you had any personal discussions with? I
have had a few personal discussions, and I think you keep saying that they have anti-discrimination policies, but this is not a discriminatory bill. So this does not take that away. This does not promote discrimination. It actually just protects religious freedoms. And in most cases in other states, those religious freedoms those court cases have been minorities. In almost every single case, it's been a minority member of that practices a religion that has taking the government to court and actually won. Minorities. We're not talking about necessarily just talking about one way of thinking, and this is not something that's discriminatory, and I think we're using that language a lot, and it's given the wrong impression.
Well, I respect your opinion, as you know. I disagree with that, but I certainly respect your opinion. You know, in Kentucky, there was a clerk who refused to provide a license to a gay couple, a marriage license to a gay couple. Could that interfere with a gay couple in West Virginia? Could that happen here? I guess is my question. If this becomes law, and tell me why you believe that can't happen.
Well, that would violate some laws already, and we'd have to go through that compelling interest test that I'm talking about. Okay, we can't violate somebody's civil rights or human rights.
Okay, and one more question, and I do want to speak to the bill, Mr. President. One more question. The term government actors or state actors, what does that mean? Define that for me, please.
Okay, so that would mean all levels of government from the state on down.
So state, county, municipality.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Mr. President, I'd like to speak to the bill, please.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. This has moved very quickly, and I can't articulate like my leader did there, but I've got some major concerns with this bill. I do believe it is a license to discriminate. I'm sorry, I just don't know why we want to move in this direction. We always talk about how we want to bring people to West Virginia and how we want to welcome people to West Virginia, and then we throw something out like this. I just don't see why we want to, what appears to me, attack certain people in certain ways of life and allow that to happen. Now, that's what this appears to me to be, with all due respect. You know, I believe that what happened in Kentucky can happen here. And I believe that it would have to be determined by a court, and it could drag it out and put another black eye on the state of West Virginia. There's 17 cities, at least, that has adopted fairness ordinances that I believe are in true jeopardy if they are challenged if this bill passes. And they're little rural areas like Sutton, all the way to our biggest cities like Charleston and Huntington, and everything in between. And we talk about how we want local government to have local control and make local decisions until it's something we don't like. That was something we don't like, then we know what's best for our municipalities. You know, there's a coalition in West Virginia. I think it's called Opportunity West Virginia. And again, I had to do a very quick search here, and it says, we're proud to have strong support of West Virginia employers today that have made the commitment. The poll data today outlines non-discrimination policy support is a key factor to economic development puzzle in attracting and retaining jobs. That's just one line. And they talk about this throughout this whole Metro News article. It is people who's trying to attract good paying jobs in West Virginia. You know, we always say all kinds are welcome in our state, and we want to welcome them with open arms. Unless maybe they don't look like us, unless maybe they don't talk like us, unless maybe they don't think like us, and most importantly, maybe if they don't love like us. You know, the problem is maybe we should start listening to the younger people in this state. I have the opportunity to go to the universities in my district and talk to young people. And they hate stuff like this. They can't believe we're even talking about stuff like this. They want a more inclusive West Virginia. They don't want to be having these kind of discussions. They just want things to be normal for everybody, regardless of how they feel about certain issues and how they love maybe a little differently than most of us in this room. You know, I've said this so many times. I've learned so much from my children who are 39 and 40 now. And I'm going to have to go home and hear about this, of how silly a bunch of old people are talking about the future of West Virginia and how we think it should look. Not how it is, not how the future wants it to be, but how we think it should look. And we should paint that perfect little picture and go home to our perfect little world and act like none of this exists. I'm sorry, I totally disagree that this is not a license to discriminate. I think there's going to be more challenges to this law. I think it's going to become the forefront of embarrassment again and show backwoods mentality for the state of West Virginia, when I think we could simplify it all. Why don't we all just try to get along? Why don't we all just let people be what they want to be, and let them love who they want to love and practice their religion the way they want to practice their religion. You know, the United States Constitution already protects our religious freedoms. So, quite frankly, I think this is hogwash, and I think the way this is being spun is disingenuous. And I'm saddened. I'm saddened that when the next time I go to WVU and talk to students, I'm going to have to explain this bill. I'm deeply saddened by that, Mr. President. But you know what? I know what's going to happen here. I know that board's going to light up, and there's not going to be very many red votes, but I'm voting no. I'm going to be very proud to vote no. And when I go back home, I don't have a problem explaining my no vote, Mr. President. Not one problem at all. So with that, I thank you all for listening to me. I apologize for getting a little emotional here on this issue, but it's just things like that I think will always move West Virginia backward and not forward like we talk about. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to point something out for the body. In particular, what was being discussed about local ordinances that many cities around the state have enacted. It's my interpretation of this bill, and I've tried to do as much homework as I possibly could, that this bill doesn't do anything to affect any of those ordinances that are in place. And I'll try to walk the body through that and harken back to my con law days at Duquesne Law School. So this bill does, and it was correctly pointed out, set up what is the compelling governmental interest test, which is the strict scrutiny test. And my friend, the senator from Mason, talked about how other states have, these bills, this type of legislation, but haven't experienced any issues with it. And so there are some states, you did reference the state of Texas or the state of Florida. Those states don't have, we'll say, a protected class in their statewide non-discrimination ordinance based on sexual orientation. But there are cities, large cities, small cities, medium-sized cities, in both Florida and Texas that have non-discrimination ordinances like the ones that we have here in West Virginia. And so if someone were to have a case against a city that had a non-discrimination ordinance that included that as a protected class, the compelling governmental interest would have been to include that protected class. And so because that exists, this piece of legislation can't be used to, in my opinion, overturn a city's non-discrimination ordinance. Reference was made to the state of South Dakota, of which this bill that we have before us is modeled quite heavily upon. If you look at their largest city, which is their capital, I believe, they have a non-discrimination ordinance that differs from their state. And so the city has made it a compelling governmental interest. And that ordinance still is on the books there with this piece of legislation enacted into law in that state. And so I have heard the concerns of the senator from Cabell and the senator from Marion on non-discrimination ordinances that may have been passed or enacted by cities across the state. And I think that what the senator from Mason was discussing of a compelling governmental interest doesn't override that, because that city has made that their compelling governmental interest. And so I don't think that this bill does anything to affect that. That's just my interpretation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion before I recognize the senator from Mason to close debate. Senator from Mason, close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. So in closing, this equal protection for religion is a compelling interest test used in court that helps protect religious freedoms from government intrusion. It gives all people that have deeply held religious beliefs a fair day in court if the government infringes on those freedoms. It doesn't guarantee a win in court, but it simply provides a check against unfair government action on religious beliefs. There have been some comments regarding municipalities. The senator from Brooke added that, regarding this bill, in regards to municipalities and counties, under this law, the court can actually rule that those counties and municipalities have a compelling interest to have an ordinance. So protection for religion was made a law in the federal government in 1993. It didn't apply in all states at that time, though. Since then, 23 other states have passed a religious protection law, and 10 other states have language through state court decisions. Montana and South Dakota just recently passed one in 2021, and on January 18, 2023, North Dakota passed it with a vote of 90-0. West Virginia is only one of 19 states that does not have a protection for religion law. It actually, Mr. President, we rank 49th out of 50 when it comes to religious freedom protection. Did I hear you ask what state is below us? Only New York, Mr. President, only New York. California is above West Virginia in religious protection freedoms. California. I've stated this, and I'll state it again because it's really important. This is not a tool for discrimination. It is a shield to protect all people. It's not a sword that attacks a specific group of people. It's a shield to protect. The bill doesn't mention any class of people. It doesn't have a class of people mentioned at all. It's been in law in many states for many, many years, and there has not been one case of discrimination. When we talk about businesses, which I know a lot of people in this body have been concerned about, according to the United States Department of Commerce, the 21 states that have passed this into law, they have shown tremendous growth. Their gross domestic product grew by an average of 4.1%. They had GDP growth in excess of 6%. Texas's growth was 8.9% after it was passed. Florida saw a 6.5% growth. Arizona grew about 6.5%, and so did Oklahoma. It's also been proven to be good for tourism and entertainment industries, Mr. President. According to the Department of Commerce, the year after these states passed these bills, they saw an average growth of 4.8% in the tourism and entertainment industries alone. Arizona saw a growth of almost 12%, Illinois 10, Florida 10, and Texas 8.3. Just wanted to add those numbers to make sure everybody understands this isn't going to harm West Virginia. It's not going to harm the people of West Virginia. These laws really don't end up applying in very many cases at all. But in the few cases where they do apply, it is really, really important to the people that are involved in it. The bottom line is, we shouldn't punish someone for practicing their religion unless there's a very good reason to do so. It's hard for me to believe that in America, the land of the free, Mr. President, we have to pass a law in West Virginia to protect our right to exercise our religion, to express our religious beliefs in America, the land of the free. Mr. President, thank you. I urge passage.
Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed to vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 30 yeas, 3 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Introduction of guest.